The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 cycles, and in all that time, they had never once known fear. They had conquered over 300 worlds, enslaved dozens of species, and built an empire that stretched across the entire Orion Spur like a dark stain upon the galaxy itself. High Commander Zethral stood upon the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and gazed out at the endless void with all 6 of his eyes. Behind him, junior officers scurried about their duties with nervous energy, for the High Commander was not known for his patience or his mercy. "Report," Zethral commanded. His voice like gravel scraping against metal. A young communications officer stepped forward, her scales pale with anxiety. She held a data tablet in her trembling claws and spoke quickly, eager to deliver her news and retreat to safety. "High Commander, our long-range sensors have detected organized radio signals emanating from a small planet in an unremarkable system at the edge of our territory. The signals appear to be primitive broadcasts, entertainment and communication waves that suggest a pre-spaceflight civilization." Zethral's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among his kind. Another primitive species, another world ripe for conquest. Another footnote in the endless expansion of the Dominion. "Show me," he ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a small blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. It was unremarkable in every way, just another rock covered in water and primitive life forms. No different from 1,000 other worlds the Dominion had crushed beneath its heel. The inhabitants call their world Earth. The officer continued, and they referred to themselves as humans. "Our analysis suggests they have achieved only basic space travel, limited to their own moon and a few robotic probes sent to neighboring planets. They pose no threat to the Dominion whatsoever." Zethral studied the image for a long moment. The world was positioned in a strategically useless location, far from any trade routes or valuable resources, but that did not matter. The Dominion did not tolerate the existence of other intelligent species, no matter how weak or insignificant they might appear. "Standard cleansing protocol," he declared without hesitation. "Deploy a single antimatter compression bomb. I want that world reduced to rubble before the next cycle begins." The officers around him nodded in agreement. This was routine, after all. Just another extermination among thousands that had come before. No one questioned the order. No one hesitated. No one felt even a flicker of doubt within hours. An automated courier ship departed from the Eternal Conquest, carrying in its hold a weapon of terrible power. The antimatter compression bomb was a marvel of Valkyrie engineering, capable of cracking a planet's crust and rendering it completely lifeless. It had been used countless times before, and it had never failed. High Commander Zethral archived the matter as concluded and turned his attention to other concerns. The humans of Earth were already forgotten, dismissed as just another dead species that had never been given the chance to truly live 17 cycles passed without incident. Dominion continued its expansion, conquering new worlds and crushing any resistance it encountered. Zethral received commendations for his efficiency and was promoted to oversee an even larger fleet. The little blue world called Earth faded from memory entirely, just another line in an endless database of exterminated civilizations. And then the courier ship, returned Zethral, was in his private chambers when the alert came through. And at first he did not understand why his officers were so agitated. Courier ships returned all the time, their missions completed, their holds empty. It was the most mundane event imaginable, but when he reached the docking bay, he understood immediately that something was terribly wrong. The courier ship sat in its berth, its hull scarred and battered as if it had traveled through a storm of debris. Technicians surrounded it, their instruments beeping with readings that made no sense. And in the center of the cargo hold, the bomb remained. It had not detonated. Zethral pushed through the crowd of confused officers, his mind racing with impossible questions. How had the weapon failed? And why had the courier returned? And what had happened during those 17 cycles in the Sol system? "High Commander," a senior technician called out, her voice shaking with something that sounded almost like terror. "You need to see this." She led him to the bomb itself, and Zethral felt his heart stop beating for a long, terrible moment. The weapon had been opened, its casing carefully removed and then replaced with obvious precision. Someone had accessed the internal mechanisms, studied them, and then sealed the device back together. But that was not the worst part. Attached to the bomb's casing was a small metal plaque. And upon that plaque was a message written in perfect Velkari script. The letters were elegant and precise, as if carved by a master craftsman, and they spelled out words that would haunt Zethral for the rest of his days. "Thank you for the gift," the message read. "We improved it. Please find enclosed version 2. We kept a copy." For 3 seconds, there was only silence. Zethral stared at the message, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing him. It was impossible, completely and utterly impossible. The humans were primitives, barely capable of reaching their own moon. They could not have intercepted the bomb. They could not have understood its mechanisms. And they certainly could not have improved upon Velkari technology, and then the bomb exploded. The detonation was unlike anything the Dominion had ever witnessed. The blast wave tore through the docking bay, through the flagship, through the orbital station surrounding it, and continued outward with unstoppable force. Velkari Prime's largest military moon, home to 3 million soldiers and the heart of the Dominion's defensive fleet, simply ceased to exist. Israel died in that first instant, vaporized along with everyone else who had gathered to examine the mysterious returned weapon. He never had the chance to understand what had happened, never had the chance to warn his people, never had the chance to realize the terrible mistake he had made, but others survived. And they watched in horror as the explosion faded and the debris scattered across the void. They ran the calculations over and over again, refusing to believe the results. But the numbers did not lie. The bomb that had returned from Earth was 700 times more powerful than the original design. Primitives had not merely survived the Dominion's attack. They had taken the weapon meant to destroy them, and they had made it better. And they had sent it back as a message that could not be ignored, somewhere in the darkness of space. 8 billion humans looked up at their night sky and smiled. They had been threatened and they had responded. And now the galaxy would learn what happened when you tried to kill the people of Earth. The Velkari Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 cycles. And in all that time, they had never once known fear. That was about to change. Panic swept through the Velkari Dominion like a plague, spreading from world to world as news of the disaster reached every corner of the empire. The military moon was gone, High Commander Zethral was dead, and the weapon that had destroyed them both had come from a species that should not have been capable of lighting a fire, let alone improving antimatter technology. Admiral Kithra stood before the Dominion Council, her scales flushed dark with stress as she faced the most powerful beings in the empire. They demanded answers she did not have, solutions she could not provide, and explanations for events that defied all logic and reason. How is this possible? The first speaker demanded, slamming his clawed fist against the ancient stone table. Our intelligence indicated these humans were primitives, barely capable of reaching their own satellite. Now you tell me they have weapons that surpass our own? Kithra kept her voice steady, though her heart raced with fear. First speaker, I have no explanation for what occurred. Our scientists are analyzing the debris from the explosion, but preliminary reports suggest the humans somehow increased the bomb's yield by a factor of 700. The physics alone should be impossible. Then your scientists are incompetent, another council member hissed. Or perhaps this is a trick, a deception orchestrated by one of our enemies to make us fear shadows. 3 million soldiers are dead, Kithra replied coldly. That is no shadow. The council chamber fell silent, and in that silence, Kithra could feel the weight of 12,000 cycles of unquestioned dominance beginning to crack. The Valkyrie had never faced a genuine threat, never encountered a species that could match their technology, never imagined that their reign might someday end. We must know more, the first speaker finally declared. Admiral Kithra, you will assemble a reconnaissance fleet and travel to this Sol system. You will observe the humans, analyze their capabilities, and determine whether they pose a genuine threat to the Dominion. You will not engage them unless absolutely necessary. Kithra bowed her head in acceptance. How many ships shall I take, first speaker? 40 of our finest warships, he answered. Enough firepower to glass a dozen worlds. If these humans prove hostile, you are authorized to eliminate them completely. The fleet departed 3 cycles later, jumping through hyperspace toward the distant yellow star that the humans called Sol. Kithra spent the journey reviewing every scrap of intelligence the Dominion had gathered about Earth and its inhabitants. But the information was sparse and contradictory. The humans were a young species, having developed technology only in the last few centuries. They had never encountered alien life, had no knowledge of the greater galaxy, and spent most of their time fighting among themselves over resources and ideology. By every measure, they should have been easy prey, and yet they had turned the Dominion's own weapon against them, improving it beyond anything Valkyrie scientists had ever achieved. When the fleet finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Kithra ordered all sensors to maximum power and all weapons charged and ready. She expected to find orbital defense platforms, warships, perhaps even a planetary shield of some kind. She found nothing Earth hung in the void exactly as the original scans had shown. A small blue world orbited by a single natural moon and a chaotic swarm of primitive satellites. There were no weapons platforms, no defensive installations, no signs of advanced technology whatsoever. The planet looked completely helpless, as vulnerable as it had been when Zethral had first ordered its destruction. Admiral, a sensor officer reported with obvious confusion. I am detecting no military infrastructure anywhere in the system. The humans appear to have no space-based defenses of any kind. Kithra's eyes narrowed. That is impossible. They returned our bomb with improvements that our best scientists cannot explain. They must have facilities somewhere, hidden bases or cloaked installations. We have scanned the entire system, Admiral. There is nothing. For a long moment, Kithra simply stared at the view screen, watching the little blue planet rotate slowly in the darkness. It looked so peaceful, so harmless, so utterly incapable of threatening the greatest military power in the galaxy, and yet something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones, a primal instinct warning her of danger she could not see or understand. Admiral, the communications officer suddenly shouted. We are receiving a transmission. It is coming from the planet's surface, and it is addressed directly to you by name. Kithra felt her blood run cold. They had only just arrived, had made no announcements, had given no indication of their identity or purpose. How could the humans possibly know who she was? Put it through, she ordered. Her voice barely above a whisper. The view screen flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a female, with pale skin and dark hair, sitting in what appeared to be a garden filled with colorful plants. Behind her, small humans, children perhaps, played on green grass while winged creatures sang in the branches of nearby trees. The female smiled warmly, and when she spoke, it was in perfect Valkyrie. Her pronunciation flawless, her grammar impeccable. Admiral Kithra, welcome to our solar system. We detected your arrival approximately 6 hours ago and have been waiting to make contact. I hope your journey was pleasant. Kithra could not respond. She could only stare at the screen in stunned disbelief. 6 hours ago, they'd still be in hyperspace, theoretically undetectable by any known technology. We understand that you are frightened, the human continued, her voice gentle and calm. That is reasonable, given recent events. Your people attempted to destroy our world, and we responded in a way that must seem quite shocking. But we bear you no ill will, Admiral. We simply wish to send a message that we are not to be trifled with. The children continued to play behind her, laughing and shouting with innocent joy. The birds continued to sing. It was the most peaceful scene Kithra had ever witnessed, and it terrified her more than any battle she had ever fought. We would very much like to talk, the human said. Not as enemies, but as potential friends. The galaxy is vast, and there is room for all of us. But before any conversation can begin, you must understand something important. The female leaned forward slightly, and her warm smile never wavered, but something in her eyes changed. Something ancient and dangerous and utterly unafraid. We know you are here. We will always know when you are here. And if you attempt to harm our world again, there will be no warning, no return message, no second chance. We will simply end you, completely and permanently, in ways you cannot possibly imagine. She leaned back again, and the warmth returned to her expression. But we would prefer to be friends. The choice is yours. The transmission ended, and the view screen returned to the image of Earth, still hanging peacefully in the void. Still looking utterly defenseless, Admiral Kithra stood in silence for a long moment, her mind racing with implications she could barely comprehend. Then she turned to her navigation officer and spoke the words that no Valkyrie commander had ever spoken in 12,000 cycles of conquest. Set a course for home. We are leaving immediately, Admiral? The officer asked in confusion. Our orders no longer matter, Kithra interrupted. Something is deeply wrong here, more wrong than anything we have ever encountered. We must return to the Council and warn them. The fleet turned and fled. 40 of the mightiest warships in the galaxy, running from a planet that had shown them nothing but a woman sitting in a garden. But Kithra knew the truth now, could feel it in every fiber of her being. The humans were not primitives. They were something far, far worse. For the first time in 12,000 cycles of conquest and domination, the Valkyrie Dominion did something that would have been unthinkable just a few short cycles ago. They requested a diplomatic meeting with the species they had tried to exterminate. The Council debated for days, their pride warring with their fear, as Admiral Kithra's report circulated through the highest levels of government. Some called for an immediate full-scale invasion, arguing that the humans must be destroyed before they could become an even greater threat. Others counseled caution, pointing out that 40 warships had fled in terror from a single transmission. In the end, fear won. The Dominion would talk first and fight later. If fighting proved necessary at all, the humans responded to the diplomatic request within hours, proposing a meeting on neutral ground, a dead moon, an unclaimed system far from both Earth and Valkyrie Prime. It was a reasonable suggestion, and the Council agreed immediately, eager to learn more about these strange beings who had turned their own weapon against them. Diplomat Prime Shalveen was chosen to lead the delegation, a veteran negotiator who had brokered treaties with a dozen conquered species. She was accompanied by a team of advisors, scientists, and military analysts, all tasked with learning as much as possible about human capabilities and intentions. A Kosk battle group of 300 warships waited at the edge of the system, ready to intervene if the meeting went badly. It was the largest concentration of military force the Dominion had deployed in centuries, and even then, many on the Council worried it might not be enough. The Valkyrie delegation arrived at the meeting site first, establishing themselves in a prefabricated structure on the moon's barren surface. They set up scanning equipment, communication arrays, and hidden weapons, preparing for every possible contingency. when the human ship finally appeared. Shalveen could not believe her eyes. It was small, perhaps 100th the size of the smallest Volcari vessel, and it looked ancient and fragile, as if it had been assembled from salvaged parts and held together with little more than hope and determination. There were visible weld marks on the hull, exposed cables running along the exterior, and the engine exhaust flickered with an unsteady rhythm that suggested imminent mechanical failure. "Is this a joke?" one of her advisors muttered. "They send this scrap heap to meet with representatives of the Dominion?" Shalveen did not answer. She was remembering Kithra's report, remembering the woman in the garden who had spoken perfect Volcari and somehow known the Admiral's name before any introductions had been made. Appearances, she was beginning to understand, meant nothing when dealing with humans. 3 figures emerged from the primitive vessel, wearing simple protective suits that looked barely adequate for the moon's harsh environment. They carried no weapons, displayed no technology, showed no fear whatsoever as they approached the much larger Volcari delegation. The leader was an older male with gray hair and weathered skin, his face marked with lines that suggested many years of life and experience. He introduced himself as David Chen and extended his hand in a gesture of greeting that Shalveen had researched extensively. She took his hand and shook it carefully, feeling the strange warmth of human skin against her scales. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," she said, speaking through a translation device that converted her words into the human language. "The Dominion has many questions," David Chen smiled, an expression that revealed blunt teeth utterly unsuited for combat. "I am sure you do. Shall we go inside and talk like civilized beings?" They gathered in the meeting chamber, the Volcari delegation on one side of a long table, the 3 humans on the other. One of the humans, a younger female, produced a container and poured dark liquid into small cups, offering them to the Volcari with cheerful hospitality. "It is called coffee," Chan explained. "A traditional beverage from our world. Please, try it." Shalveen studied the liquid suspiciously. Her scientists had scanned it for poisons and found nothing dangerous, just a mild stimulant derived from plant seeds. She took a small sip and found the bitter taste surprisingly pleasant. "It is acceptable," she said, setting down the cup. "Now, to business. The Dominion wishes to understand how you accomplished what you accomplished. Our intelligence indicated your species was primitive, incapable of spaceflight beyond your own moon. Yet you intercepted our weapon, analyzed it, improved it, and returned it to us with modifications our best scientists cannot comprehend." She leaned forward, all 6 of her eyes fixed on Chan's face. "How is this possible?" David Chen sipped his own coffee and chuckled softly, a sound that the translation device interpreted as gentle amusement. "You are asking the wrong question, Diplomat Prime. You are assuming we did this as a species, with infrastructure and institutions and organized effort. We did not." He set down his cup and folded his hands on the table. "When your bomb arrived, it crashed in a rural area called Ohio. A farmer found it in his field, half buried in the soil. He did not know what it was, but he knew it was not from Earth, so he called his neighbor. His neighbor happened to be a retired physics professor who had spent 40 years studying energy systems. She examined the device and realized it was a weapon of extraordinary power." Chum paused, letting his words sink in. "Within 6 of your cycles, 11,000 humans were working on the problem. Not because any government told them to, but because it was interesting. They communicated through our global network, sharing information and theories and discoveries faster than any official organization could have managed. Within 12 cycles, a teenager in Singapore figured out how your antimatter containment system worked. She posted her findings online, and within hours, engineers on 6 continents were building improved versions. A grandmother in Argentina solved the compression ratio problem that had limited the weapon's yield. A collective of amateur scientists in Finland developed the enhanced detonation sequence. Shalvin stared at him in stunned disbelief. You are saying that random individuals, with no coordination or oversight, improved a weapon that took our civilization centuries to develop? That is exactly what I'm saying, Chun replied. You see, Diplomat Prime, humans are strange creatures. We argue constantly, disagree about everything, and spend most of our time fighting among ourselves over petty differences. We are chaotic and stubborn, and utterly incapable of working together on anything. His smile faded, and something cold and dangerous flickered behind his eyes. Except when someone threatens us. Except when someone tries to kill our children and destroy our home. Then we stop fighting each other and start fighting the threat. Then we become something terrible and beautiful and absolutely unstoppable. He leaned forward, matching Shalvin's intense gaze. You tried to kill 8 billion people, Diplomat Prime. 8 billion humans who now know that aliens exist and that those aliens tried to murder them. You gave us a common enemy. You gave us a project. You united a species that has never been united in its entire history. David Chun's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You have no idea what you have done. The chamber fell silent. The Valkyrie delegation sat motionless, processing the implications of what they had just heard. A species that could accomplish such feats without organization, without leadership, without even trying, what might they accomplish if they actually focused their efforts? What do you want? Shalvin finally asked. What are your demands? Chun's warm smile returned, and he shrugged his shoulders in a gesture of casual indifference. We want to be left alone. We want to explore the galaxy at our own pace, make friends with other species, and learn everything there is to learn about this vast and wonderful universe. We have no desire to conquer or dominate. That is not who we are. He stood up, signaling that the meeting was nearly over. But make no mistake, Diplomat Prime. If you come for us again, we will be ready. And next time, we will not settle for destroying a single moon. He extended his hand once more. Do we have an understanding? Shalvin looked at that hand for a long moment, knowing that taking it meant acknowledging the humans as equals, something no Valkyrie had ever done with any species. Then she took it, because she understood now that the alternative was extinction. We have an understanding, she said, but even as she spoke the words, she knew in her heart that this was not truly peace. It was merely the beginning. The fragile peace lasted less than one cycle. Despite Diplomat Prime Shalvin's warnings, despite Admiral Kithra's reports, despite every piece of evidence suggesting that the humans were far more dangerous than they appeared, the Dominion Council could not accept the truth. For 12,000 cycles, they had ruled the stars unchallenged, and their pride would not allow them to bow before primitives, who had only recently discovered fire. The decision was made in secret, without consulting the diplomats or the scientists who had actually interacted with the humans. A faction of hardliners within the council seized control, arguing that the return bomb had been a fluke, a lucky accident that could never be repeated. The humans had no fleet, no orbital defenses, no military infrastructure whatsoever. They were vulnerable, exposed, and ripe for extermination. Admiral Vithanol was given command of the largest invasion force ever assembled in the history of the Dominion. 600 warships, each carrying weapons capable of sterilizing entire continents. Manned by crews who had been told nothing of the diplomatic meeting or the warnings that had come from it. Their orders were simple. Jump to Earth orbit and glass the planet from space, continent by continent, until nothing remained. Alavethanol was a veteran of 100 campaigns, a warrior who had never known defeat. He accepted his mission without hesitation. confident that the humans would fall just as every other species had fallen before the might of the wise. Dominion the fleet made the jump to Sol in perfect formation, emerging from hyperspace in a sphere around the blue planet. 600 ships, weapons charged, targeting systems locked onto population centers below. It was enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. More than enough to handle one defenseless rock. Earth looked exactly as it had before. Blue oceans, green continents, primitive satellites drifting in chaotic orbits. There were no shields, no weapons platforms, no warships rising to meet them. The planet hung in the void like a sacrifice waiting to be claimed. All ships. Report status. Vithnal commanded from the bridge of his flagship one by one. The captains confirmed their readiness. Weapons hot, shields raised, crews eager for battle that they knew would never come. This was not war, it was extermination, as routine as crushing an insect beneath one's heel. On my command, Vithnal declared, savoring the moment. Fire. Nothing happened, the weapons did not fire. The targeting systems went dark. The main view screen flickered and died. Across the entire fleet, every single ship went silent at exactly the same moment, as if some giant hand had simply switched them off. What is happening? Vithnal roared. Report. His officers scrambled at their consoles, desperately trying to restore power, but nothing responded. Navigation was gone, engines were dead. Life support sputtered and wheezed like a dying animal. 600 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy drifted helplessly in orbit around a planet they had come to destroy. Admiral, the communications officer called out, his voice trembling with fear. We are receiving a transmission. It appears to be coming from the planet's surface. Put it through, Vithnal commanded, though he already knew in his heart that he would not like what he was about to hear. The emergency backup screen flickered to life, displaying the image of a human male. He was young, perhaps barely an adult by their standards, with dark skin and tired eyes that suggested he had not slept in many days. Behind him was a cluttered room filled with electronic equipment and discarded food containers. Hey there, the human said, speaking in heavily accented but understandable Valkyrie. My name is Marcus. I am 19 years old, and I wrote the virus that just disabled your entire fleet. Vithnal stared at the screen in stunned disbelief. A child had done this, a single juvenile human working alone in a messy room. It took me about 2 weeks once we got code samples from the first reconnaissance fleet. Marcus continued, rubbing his eyes with obvious exhaustion. Your cybersecurity is honestly terrible. Like, embarrassingly bad. We have video games with better protection than your military networks. The young human leaned back in his chair and sighed. Look, I know you probably came here to kill everyone, and I get it. Your bosses are scared and angry, and they think destroying us will make the fear go away. But it will not. Nothing you do will make the fear go away, because you are right to be afraid. Marcus held up a small device, no larger than his palm. It was simple and unimpressive. Just a metal cylinder with a few blinking lights. This is version 7 of the bomb you sent us, he explained. It fits in my hand now, and it is powerful enough to ignite your home star. We have about 40,000 of them, scattered across our planet in locations you will never find. If you destroy Earth, they will be launched automatically, and every world in your empire will burn. He set the device down carefully. But here's the thing. We do not want to use them. Humans are weird about killing. We will do it if we have to. We will fight harder than you can possibly imagine if our survival is at stake. But we would really, really rather not. We have seen too much death in our own history, caused too much pain with our own hands. We know what war truly costs, and we do not wish to pay that price again. Marcus leaned forward, his tired eyes suddenly sharp and intense. So here is what is going to happen. We are going to tow your ships to the edge of our system and let you go. Every single one of you will return home safely, and you will deliver a message to your council. Leave us alone. Do not come back. Do not send more fleets. Do not try to threaten or intimidate or destroy us. Just leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. It is that simple. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But if you ever return with hostile intent, there will be no second warning. We will not disable your ships and send you home with a message. We will simply end you, completely and permanently, in ways you cannot begin to imagine. Your worlds will burn. Your species will be scattered to the void. And the name Valkyrie will become nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered by other civilizations. Marcus smiled, a weary expression that held no joy. Your move. The transmission ended, and the screen went dark for a long moment. Admiral Vithanel stood in silence, processing what he had just witnessed. His fleet, the mightiest force ever assembled by the Dominion, had been neutralized by a teenager working in his bedroom. Their most advanced weapons had been turned against them by a species that should not have been capable of understanding the basic principles involved, and now that species was offering mercy, asking only to be left in peace when they could have destroyed the fleet with ease. Admiral, his first officer whispered, "What do we do?" Vithanel closed his eyes and felt the weight of 12,000 cycles of conquest pressing down upon his shoulders. The Dominion had never surrendered, never retreated, never acknowledged any species as its equal, but the Dominion had also never faced anything like the humans. "We wait," he finally answered. "We accept their offer. We return home and deliver their message to the Council. And then?" Vithanel opened his eyes and looked at the view screen, now showing only static and darkness. "And then we pray that they meant what they said about preferring peace, true to their word." The humans towed every ship to the edge of the Sol system and released them unharmed. The fleet limped home in disgrace, their engines barely functional, their weapons permanently disabled, their pride shattered beyond repair. The message they carried was simple: do not return this time. The council listened, but they did not forget, and they did not forgive in their hearts. They swore that someday, somehow, they would find a way to destroy the humans and reclaim the dominance that had been taken from them. They did not yet understand that it was already far, far too late for such dreams. The humans did not stay in Sol within a single generation of the failed invasion. Human ships began appearing throughout the Orion Spur. They were not warships bristling with weapons, not invasion forces seeking conquest, not the terrible vengeance that the Valkyrie had feared and expected. They were explorers and traders and scientists, curious beings who wanted nothing more than to see what lay beyond the next star. They came in ships that still looked impossibly primitive, held together with welded metal and stubborn determination. They wore simple clothing and carried no visible weapons. They smiled at everyone they met and offered handshakes and something called coffee, and wherever they went, they changed everything. The first species to encounter the wandering humans was the Kethri, a peaceful people who had been enslaved by the Dominion for over 2,000 cycles. They labored in mines and factories, their spirits broken, their hope extinguished, their future nothing but endless servitude stretching into infinity. The humans arrived on a trading vessel, looking for rare minerals to power their expanding fleet. What they found instead was a civilization in chains, a people who had forgotten what freedom even meant within 6 months. The Kethri were free. The humans did not liberate them through military force. They simply shared. They taught the Kethri how to build weapons, how to hack Dominion security systems, how to coordinate resistance movements across multiple worlds. They provided technology that the Dominion had spent millennia keeping from subject species, giving it away freely without asking for anything in return when the Valkyrie garrison demanded to know what was happening. The human traders smiled their warm smiles and claimed ignorance. They were just merchants, after all, simple travelers looking to make honest trades. They knew nothing about the rebellion brewing beneath the surface. The Dominion did not believe them, but they also did not dare to attack. The memory of 600 disabled warships drifting helplessly in Earth orbit was still fresh in every military mind. Whatever the humans were doing, directly confronting them was not an option, so the Kethri rose up, armed with human knowledge and human technology. They overthrew their oppressors and claimed their homeworld as their own. And when the Dominion sent a fleet to reclaim them, the Kethri fought back with weapons that should have been impossible, defenses that should not have existed, tactics that bore the unmistakable signature of human innovation. The fleet retreated in confusion, and defeat word spread quickly through the enslaved populations of the Dominion. There were beings called humans who offered help without demanding payment, who shared their gifts without asking for submission, who believed that all intelligent species deserve freedom and dignity. It seemed too good to be true, but the example of the Kethri proved that it was real. The humans moved from system to system, never conquering, never demanding, only offering. Dying civilizations received medical technology that saved billions of lives. Isolated species received communication systems that connected them to the wider galaxy for the first time. Oppressed peoples received the tools they needed to break their chains, and always, the humans asked for nothing in return except friendship. Why? The leaders of the liberated worlds would ask, "Why do you help us when you could simply take what you want? You have the power to conquer the galaxy. Why share it instead?" The humans would shrug and smile and sip their strange bitter drinks, because that is what humans do. They would say, "We find problems and we solve them. We see people suffering and we help. Not always, not perfectly. We are messy and contradictory, and we fight among ourselves constantly. But when we see someone in need, something in us demands that we reach out." It made no sense to species that had only known domination and submission. It seemed like weakness, like foolishness, like a strategy that must surely hide some deeper purpose. But year after year, decade after decade, the humans kept giving without taking. They kept helping without demanding. They kept proving that their kindness was genuine. The Volcari Dominion, which had ruled through fear and force for 12,000 cycles, watched helplessly as its empire crumbled. World after world slipped from its grasp, not conquered by human fleets, but liberated by human ideas. The subject species no longer cower before their masters. They stood tall and defiant, armed with weapons and knowledge that the humans had freely shared within a century. The Dominion controlled less than a tenth of its former territory high commander Zethral, who had originally ordered the strike on Earth, had died in the explosion of the return bomb. But his successor and his successor's successor, and countless leaders after them, all lived long enough to see the consequences of that single fateful decision. The last ruler of the Volcari Dominion was an ancient female named Kithra, the same admiral who had once fled from Earth with 40 warships after receiving a transmission from a woman in a garden. She had survived the intervening decades through a combination of political skill and sheer stubbornness. Watching her civilization collapse around her while she struggled to hold together whatever fragments remained in her final days. She requested an audience with a human ambassador. She expected to be refused or mocked or ignored. Instead, a young woman arrived at her bedside within hours, traveling across half the galaxy to grant a dying enemy's last wish. The ambassador's name was Chun, and she was the granddaughter of David Chun, the diplomat who had first explained humanity to the Dominion so many decades ago. She had her grandfather's warm smile and his calm, patient manner. "Why?" Kithra asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You could have conquered us. You could have destroyed us. You could have done to us exactly what we tried to do to you. Why share your gifts with everyone? Why lift up species that mean nothing to you? Ambassador Chun sat beside the dying commander and took her withered claw in gentle hands. "Because that is who we are," she said softly. "We find problems and we solve them. We see people suffering and we help. Not because we expect reward, not because we want power, but because something deep inside us cannot bear to see pain and do nothing." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "Your people made a mistake, Commander. You saw us as primitives, as prey, as just another species to be exterminated and forgotten. You did not understand that humans are different. We are not defined by our technology or our military power. We are defined by our hearts." Kithra's eyes, dim with age, focused on the young ambassador's face. "And what are human hearts made of?" Chun smiled, the same warm, unsettling smile that had haunted Velkari nightmares for a century. "Contradiction?" she answered. "We are capable of terrible cruelty and breathtaking kindness. We fight and love with equal passion. We destroy ourselves with one hand and heal each other with the other. We are chaos and order, war and peace, hatred and love, all wrapped up in fragile bodies that live for barely a century." She leaned closer to the dying commander. "But when someone threatens our home, when someone tries to hurt our children, when someone shows us a challenge we have never faced before, we do not just rise to meet it. We exceed it. We take whatever you throw at us, and we make it better." Ambassador Chun stood and prepared to leave. "You launched a bomb at Earth, Commander. We sent it back enhanced. That is not a threat, and it is not a boast. It is simply who we are. It is what we do. It is the fire that burns in every human heart. From the first child who learned to use a stone as a tool to the last generation that will sail among the stars long after your species and mine are dust." Kithra closed her eyes, feeling the last of her strength fading away. "I think I understand now," she whispered. "We were never fighting a species. We were fighting an idea. And ideas cannot be killed." "No," Ambassador Chun agreed softly. "They cannot. The last ruler of the Velkari Dominion died quietly that night, surrounded by servants who had once been slaves and guards who had once been prisoners. Her empire had fallen, her species reduced to a handful of worlds at the edge of known space. Her legacy nothing but a cautionary tale whispered by children. But in her final moments, she understood something that none of her predecessors had ever grasped, that humans had not defeated the Dominion through superior weapons or greater numbers or more advanced technology. They had defeated it by being human, by taking a bomb meant to destroy them and sending it back. Improved by offering friendship to those who had tried to murder them, by sharing their gifts with the entire galaxy without asking for anything in return. Velkari had ruled through fear. And fear could be overcome. The humans spread through the stars by inspiring hope. And hope was eternal in the end. That made all the difference.